Okay, good afternoon. We'll get going in just a minute. I hope everyone had a good weekend. We'll give it a second for people to log on. We weren't on yet this week. I was away the last 2 days, so it's good to be back. And we'll have Sean Scanlon on in a few minutes, and we'll talk about a bunch of issues, primarily Tweed and the impact that will have in general. Now, obviously, I've talked about this many times in the past, and I am supportive of the expansion at Tweed, but there have been neighbors in East Haven who are speaking up and raising some questions about that. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail, and also some other political issues happening, and maybe even on a state and local level. So, Sean's here, okay? Sean, I'll bring you on now.
Hey, Steve.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
I can't hear you, though.
Can you hear me now?
That is. Jennifer, how are you? Sean, I can't hear you.
Can't hear me now?
Is anybody else not hearing you, or maybe it's just me? I don't know. My volumes are on. Hey, Jennifer, is anybody watching? Let us know who can hear us and who can't. Meredith can hear Sean, but I can't hear Sean. So let me do it something different. Sean, try it again. Say hi. Say hi.
Hi, Steve.
All right, how to fix this problem? All right, let's do this. Is that better? Can everybody hear us both now?
I can hear you,
okay,
Steve.
Good. Sean, thanks for coming on. Welcome. I haven't had you on since the last time we talked about Yellowstone. Are you done?
I'm not done. We are still on season 2. My wife has gotten really into some Netflix shows like Virgin River and now prefers to just watch TV shows without me. And I kind of watch mine on my computer sometimes, but we got to get back to it.
Well, I'm hearing that you're pretty busy.
I am pretty busy, so I haven't had a lot of time to watch shows, in fairness. But I am starting. I made the mistake of watching one episode of Outer Banks on Saturday, and now I'm kind of hooked onto that. But I'm not sure what your listeners think about Outer Banks, but it's a little over the top, but kind of escapist.
A bunch of rich kids, and they find a body in a boat or something like that, right? Or
they're actually much more middle-class kids going up against the rich kids to look for buried treasure in a boat off the coast of North Carolina.
Okay. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I hope everybody else isn't. You are too? I don't know how to fix that. But in any event, we'll work with it the best we can. You know what? Hold on one second. There's got to be a better way to do this. We didn't have this problem before, did we?
I don't think so.
Give me 1 second, Sean. Because we do want to figure this out.
I have to tell you, Steve, while you get your headphones on, you seem to have a lot of Outer Banks fans that listen to your podcast. So I will keep going to it.
I watched the first few episodes. Is that better? Does that sound better?
I think so.
But I didn't stick with it. I'm actually kind of on Atypical right now, which is kind of a cool show about a kid with autism.
Haven't seen that.
Okay. So, in any event, let's talk about Tweed. I think we don't really need help understanding the benefits of expanding Tweed. I think from a regional perspective, everybody understands that. East Haven people, whether it's legitimate neighbors with an issue or politically based or what have you, have come out and been vocal against it. There were 2 press releases yesterday, one from the mayor, Kafora, and also one from Zulo, and they were basically, we're not doing anything until we get answers. So where do we stand with Tweed, and what are our next steps?
Well, I went to the East Haven Town Council last night to basically give them an update. And what I basically said was that this process is very far from over. There's a small but vocal group of people who I think are expressing some concerns. Most people, I think, do think this is a good thing for both the region and certainly their towns. But their concerns are looking for more information and wondering whether their elected officials will have a chance to weigh in. And the answer to that is absolutely. We have to get permission from the various East Haven boards and commissions that are relevant to our process moving forward. We have to get approval from the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We have to get permission from the FAA. We have to get permission from the New Haven Board of Alders. So all along the way, there will be many steps in which people can both interact with the process, but more importantly, there are checks and balances there. So if you're a member of a certain board or commission in East Haven and you have questions, you're going to have a chance to ask them. If you are concerned about the environment, then the state's agency that's in charge of preserving and protecting the environment, they're going to weigh in too. So, the idea that this is being rushed and that, we're about to just finalize this thing tomorrow is just not the case. There are many, many opportunities for people to weigh in. And if people have questions, as I do in my state rep job, I think, Steve, as you know, I give out my cell phone publicly. I answer emails. I, try to set a world record for email response answering. I'm knocking on doors in the neighborhood, talking to people directly. So, I'm here if you want to find me. And if you have questions, we'd love to talk to you.
No, I'll defend you a little bit there, because one of the attacks I'm hearing is that, there's no questions being asked at these meetings. And I know from history, you've answered a lot of things on a regular basis. So nothing saying you have to be answered at a meeting. It can be answered by email or with a phone call. But that said, talk to me about the process. So we were talking about expansion, and that has become a new terminal. When did we take that leap?
So the Cliff Notes version of the story here is that, Steve, in September of 2019, before I even started here at the airport, I started 2 months later, we embarked on a master plan update. And the master plan basically is the document that any airport every 10 to 15 years has to file with the FAA. It's basically like a game plan or a roadmap for where the airport wants to go. So in September of 19, we start this process. It's an 18-month-long process that includes many public meetings, public comments, and it looks at everything. And the three things that we wanted to look at in that master plan were, number one, what should the length of the runway be if we decide to expand it? Number two, should we keep the terminal in New Haven, where it is right now, in a mostly residential neighborhood, or should we move it over to East Haven in a mostly commercial neighborhood? And number three, what should we do with what we refer to as the crosswind runway, which is the runway you see directly behind my head? It's been closed for 5 years because it needs millions of dollars of work, and the feds won't pay for it because it no longer serves the purpose that it used to, because we have better wind coverage on the main runway. So that process plays out over the course of 18 months. In March of 2021, we finalized that process, and the report basically came out saying that we should go to 6635 in terms of feet on the runway, which is 1,035 feet more than we have today. Reason being that we can not only do that within our existing footprint, meaning we don't have to use eminent domain, we don't have to go into the wetlands, it's just completely within our property line. And by doing 1,000 more feet, we can go to some of the destinations that we want to go to directly. So there's a big misconception, Steve, out there that says, oh, they want to have bigger planes. It's actually that we want to have the planes we have now go further and put more gas in them. And we can't put more gas or more people in them right now because we have to worry about the weight restrictions we have on 5,600 feet. The second thing was they studied and said, yeah, I think it probably makes sense for you to move a terminal, especially if you're going to build a new terminal, from a mostly residential neighborhood in New Haven, where there's a 2-lane road going into it, to a place in East Haven that's mostly commercial, where there's a 4-lane road going up to the airport. And they suggested that we close the crosswind runway and put the new terminal on the end of that runway. Again, doesn't require eminent domain, doesn't require us to infringe on wetlands. It just is doing it within our existing property. Around the same time that that proposal came out and was finalized, our long-term partner, Abports, which is the partner that we've had running our airport for 22 years. You're very well versed in them, Steve, because when I was first given this job, I got attacked a lot and said, what the hell does Scanlon know about running an airport? I don't know anything about running an airport. I know about community relations. And my job as executive director is to manage community relations for the airport. the guys from airports actually run the day-to-day operations of the airport. They're professionals. They know how to do it. They have college degrees in this stuff, and they do a great job of that. They came to me and said, we will finance the operation of that. We will finance the contents of the master plan, but we have to change our relationship a little bit. And so instead of you getting all the profits from that and you having all the risk, we will take on the risk, but we will take the reward of that if this does bear out and work out. And to make a long story short, I apologize for going on. This is a long, complicated answer, is that where we stand now is on May 6th, we announced that we had a deal with AbWars to move forward. And we announced that we were proposing a $5 million community benefits package to address a lot of the concerns that I had heard from residents about noise and traffic and the environment and things like that. But people viewed that, Steve, as, oh, we're done deal. Well, no, now we have to go out and get permission and sell this thing to the public. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And that's what we will continue doing for the next year and a half before we were probably able to get the permits for all of these things from the different stakeholders that we need to get them from. And that's where we're at today.
Okay, so in some of the media that I'm seeing out there, it's talking about these surprise details in contracts or a $4 million loan or Goldman Sachs. One, is Goldman Sachs Avports?
Goldman Sachs has a company that owns Avports. So Avports is owned by a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs, yeah.
Okay. What is the $4 million loan?
So basically, one of the other things that we announced on May 6th, which is really exciting to people, is that we have a new air carrier that's going to be starting here in the fall called the Velo. They're going to be doing many flights a day, which will dramatically increase the number of options that are available to people. The CEO of that flight or that airline company is coming to New Haven on August 19th to announce the destinations for those planes, which is really, really exciting. So stay tuned for that. But in order to accompany them, or to accommodate them rather, we need to do some work on the existing terminal to make sure that it's ready for that. And to do that, we need $4 million. And so AbWorks is willing to front the $4 million to us. If our business relationship with them to do the entire project continues, they will forgive the loan. If things fall apart and we don't get a final deal with them, we can't actually negotiate that. We don't get the permits for that. It's basically a loan to us, and we'd have to pay it back just like if we loaned it from a bank. People are acting as if it's some sort of big smoking gun scandal. It's not. It's just a business transaction, a loan, and if we have to pay it back, we have to pay it back. If not, we don't.
But that $4 million is improvements to the existing terminal?
It is, yeah. Yeah. Okay, because we have a new air carrier that's going to be coming in here to do dramatically more service than we have today. But we won't be able to build a new terminal for at least 2 years. And so we have to have some temporary accommodations done and some reconfiguring of our terminal to accommodate a lot more people coming into the terminal every day, which is a good thing because that means that we have a lot more flights being offered. And I think people will be very excited about some of the destinations that they'll be able to go to out of New Haven in less than 60 days from now.
Okay, so let's go to what Representative Zullo posted. And his question, obviously, he represents East Haven. His concerns are those, and he asked a couple questions basically about what are the benefits to East Haven. So if you had to give me, to an East Haven resident, why they should be for this, what's the answer to that?
Well, a couple of things. And Mayor Carfora, who's one of the two mayors that I work with very closely on this, he's the mayor of East Haven. He was really adamant about what East Haven needed to get out of this. He really believed that East Haven had to get something out of this, right? And for a long time, the runway literally splits between East Haven and New Haven. The city of New Haven owns the airport, but there are flights that go on the East Haven side. So just a few of the things, Steve. First of all, we have $5 million of money in there that we are doing to do enhanced noise mitigation on people's houses directly in East Haven. We have money for traffic calming, $2.5 million to make the roads more traffic friendly, to make sure there's not more increased traffic. The changing of the board. Right now, there's an 8-5 majority, New Haven to 5 East Haven. We will change it to 8-7 so that it's a closer majority. There's only a 1 vote difference, which is, again, putting more seats at the table to give East Haven a bigger voice to govern this board in the airport. And then 3 specific things. Number 1, the mayor was very clear that he wanted a PLA for this project. to make sure that East Haven workers specifically were the ones building the actual terminal. This will be 1,000 construction worker job, 1,000, right? So that is a significant project. And we are working with the local unions here in East Haven to make sure that there is a component of that to require a certain amount of people who live in the community are actually working at the airport, which is a big, big deal for jobs in the East Haven area. And East Haven is a very, blue collar working class town where there's a lot of union members and a lot of construction trades guys. So it's a big deal for them. We want to create an airport development zone, something that Bradley has, where for a short period of time, if you create a job in the zone, the state will pick up 40% of the property tax burden for 5 years of that company, which is a very big deal if you're a manufacturer and you're looking around to see where you want to locate your business. If you are picking between, I hate to say it, Brantford and East Haven, and Brantford is not willing to offer you 40% less of your property tax burden, you may take a look at East Haven. And the final thing, Steve, is that any town with an airport in Connecticut gets more pilot money in terms of payment in lieu of taxes. So I think that what's happening, unfortunately, whatever George Washington is saying is really inappropriate and unfortunate. So I don't know if you can get rid of that, Steve, but really disappointing to see anybody saying that in this format. But what I think is really important for people to remember about this, Steve, is that there will be many benefits for East Haven. If there are more than people want to see, my doors are open.
Okay. Apparently it's a comment from, we blocked him. If I could delete this, I will. Okay, I think I've deleted some of these. In any event, okay, so I want to just go through a couple things. So what Zulo asked was specifically, is there any correlation between increased ticketing and the money going to East Haven?
No, right now, no, there's not. I mean, there's not any sort of local sharing provision that we have accommodated right now.
On the increase of pilot funds, the state has been poor about funding pilot funds. So that's nice, but is there going to be some sort of plan in place in the future to make sure pilot funds are funded?
Well, the budget that we passed this year, again, putting on my other hat for a second, was the biggest funding of pilot in the history of the state. And the money is in the budget to do that going forward. It's now just incumbent upon people like me and Joe Zullo to vote for budgets that have that in there, right? And shame on us if we go back on our word and then reduce that funding to these cities and towns after having finally, for the first time in a long time, gotten them closer to finally being whole.
Okay, so I just want to go back to Joe's questions. The special district, we don't know how big that'll be. So that would have to be worked out.
Yep. And again, he will be a part of that conversation because it'll have to pass in state statute.
Okay. Okay. So the people that are complaining the most, or those that are against this, what are their arguments? What are those that are legitimate, that are actually raising issues? What have they been?
I mean, you'd have to have them on your show to say that. I would just tell you that, as I said, I've been door knocking, right? It worked really well for me in my political career. It's important for me. I think it's personally the best way that I can meet people. I knocked on a guy's door just 2 hours ago, and he said, "Nobody from the airport has ever knocked on my door before. I can't believe that you're actually standing here. I'm not your biggest fan, but I at least give you a lot of credit for being here to talk to me." I will tell you, Steve, that by and large, the overwhelming majority of people I talk to say something along the lines of, "I've lived here for my whole life. I don't even notice the airport anymore. And if you can get me a cheap flight to Florida so I can go down there in the winter, or my kids can come see me when I'm down there for 6 months, I think it's great." I think there's a small but vocal minority of people who have concerns about it. I've offered to meet with them. I've offered to talk to them. We have public meetings. I'm trying to listen to them. I think that benefits package meets a lot of the concerns that they've raised. But I'll leave it to them to sort of talk about what the concerns are.
Okay. Before we move on to the next topic, I have deleted this disgusting comment. It's a spam from YouTube. I don't know how to delete it from the front end, though. So after this is over, I'll try to find a way to do that. But I want to acknowledge that you brought it up, and I didn't see it at first, but you did too. I blocked a person through YouTube. Unfortunately, we have assholes on the planet, and we run into them sometimes. That said, I do want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Guilford.
Yeah.
Because this issue of CRT in Guilford, now I will tell you this, and I've talked about this a few times, I'm not convinced CRT as a theory is being taught in Guilford schools to begin with, but it has resulted in new members on the Board of Education, and this is getting coverage from Fox News nationally to the Hartford Courant or what have you. What is the status of that? I'm getting that in general, the Republicans don't have anyone at the top of the ticket, so it's unlikely they'll have a majority on the Board of Ed anyway. But
yeah,
in your research over this and talking to people, what level of CRT is being taught? What are you looking at this going forward from the school district and what's being taught in classrooms?
So Dr. Freeman, our superintendent, has been adamant on many, many occasions, as have members of the Board of Education, both Democrat and Republican, who have said, we are 100% not teaching CRT in Guilford Public Schools. The folks that are running for the Board of Education now, I think, concede that point. I think they say, well, you're not teaching CRT directly, but you're teaching things like CRT. And my concern and my answer to that is, what exactly do you object to? If we object to, as I do, teaching children that just because they're white, they are racist, I don't think that that's right. And I don't think they think that's right. We agree on that, right? What the schools are showing people, as they should, is that racism does exist in our society, and racism has existed in terrible ways in our history, just as anti-Semitism has, just as anti-gender has, just like sexual orientation has existed. All of those things should be taught in our schools because we have to learn from our history. I don't believe that we should be telling these children that any of those things are their fault directly, just by way of being who they are, whether it's because they're straight, Catholic versus Jewish, a man versus a woman, but they should be taught about the fact that those things have existed in our history and that they're wrong. And that's what the Guilford schools are doing. I think it's a bit confusing because they are very adamant that this is happening. But my personal position on this is, if we can all agree that we should at least be informing students of the fact that these ills exist in our society, that they're not good, and we should learn from them, there really is no issue. If you don't believe that any student should ever be taught that those things exist, I'm not really sure what I can do to help you. But I do believe that, as I said, to the Hartford Courant yesterday when I was asked, there's a famous saying from Tip O'Neill that said all politics is local. Well, I think today all politics is actually national. And there's a lot of people who every day watch Fox News or get their news from these sources where all they do is talk about this stuff, this culture war stuff, that they then say, well, this must be happening here. And they've made it into an issue here. There will be a robust discussion happening this fall in Guilford between them, the Democrats, and just today, 3 independent, unaffiliated voters are running on the independent party line to run against them. And so there will be a very robust discussion this year. And my sense, Steve, having represented this town for the last 7 years and having lived here my whole life, is that most people in the town, the overwhelming majority of people in the town, are very happy with our schools. They're very happy with Dr. Freeman and the direction of the Board of Education that we have done on a bipartisan basis, with bipartisan agreement on the way we do things. And I think that they will vote accordingly in November.
I agree. I mean, I haven't spoken to Freeman, but some administrators and teachers, and they all seem to be on the same page that they're not teaching the theory of CRT, but these discussions over race and equality have happened since the beginning of time. I mean, I remember being in, 7th, 8th grade and having these discussions. So I don't know why we suddenly not want them in school. Some of these parents are losing me on that, but I don't know that they'll get a significant amount of traction anyway. Okay, that being the case, one final question or a series of questions. We have a reoccurrence of COVID numbers going up in the wrong direction. Yeah. I know Lamont in the past has actually handled it fairly well, but there were some questions on when there were mask mandates and when you can close certain businesses. Are you getting any sense that we are looking at any new rules coming down from the state anytime soon?
Well, I think the governor is reluctant to go back in time. I think all of us are, right? Like, I was really enjoying my life without a mask. And now, just because I have a young son that will not be vaccinated for quite some time, he's only 2, my wife and I are a little more careful if we're indoors. Just a little while ago, I saw the governor say that he favors a localized approach, giving mayors and first selectmen the ability to make those decisions. And frankly, I think that might be a good idea. Having a one-size-fits-all approach to the state, especially with a state where there's upwards of 70% plus people vaccinated, it might make sense to have the first selectmen of Brantford and Guilford making that decision because their vaccination rates are in the 80s versus the guy who's running Griswold if their vaccination rate is in the 40s, right? There should be some differential there. Or in Litchfield County, where the number of cases is much lower than it is here in New Haven County. So I'm not sure what the governor is going to decide to do, but I do think a more localized approach may be a better way to go, given the fact that, not to sound pessimistic, but I think COVID is going to be here for a long time to come, and we're going to have to learn how to live with it. Because if we can't convince, half of this country to get vaccinated and a sizable number of people in this state still to get vaccinated, and they don't do that, this thing will continue to linger and linger. And hopefully we all have to hope that Delta is the worst variant there is, because even though Delta is bad, it's mostly bad for unvaccinated people. Breakthrough cases are still very, very rare. And although it seems like the only people who get breakthrough cases are actually the New York Yankees, because my favorite baseball team keeps getting these players that somehow get all these breakthrough cases, but only like 1% of people actually gets a breakthrough case. So long way of saying, I think a more localized approach may be the direction the state is going in, but we're going to see how the numbers go.
And that does, to be honest, cause some problems, because then it puts pressure on, for example, in Brantford, the relationship with the public and the superintendent may not be strong. And so that decision can come with a lot of backlash. So the question is, do you put the blame on Lamont, one person for the whole state, or do you have these battles in every single town? I think I would probably prefer the governor give some overall direction, just knowing the fights that happen in every single town. Never mind the town side. I don't think, I think that probably makes more sense, but I could understand both sides of it. But I do see that it's already caused some problems. As soon as Hamlet Hernandez put out a press release saying we're all going to be masked, you had groups of parents fighting back against that. So it's just interesting to talk about the different options that are in front of them. And there's no right answer, unfortunately. I mean,
Steve, I would just tell you that every day I talk to one parent who says, unmask my children. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. You guys are dictators. And then the next minute I'll get a call from somebody that says, you should shut down every school, every business. Everyone should have to prove that they're vaccinated to go outside to the grocery store. The polar opposites on this issue alone are very, very divisive. And I think whether it's the governor, the first selectman, anybody, we're going to continue trying to find that common sense middle ground. But I just don't know what that's going to be just yet.
Okay. All right. Well, Sean, I appreciate you coming on. Before we go, I do want to apologize one more time, not just to you, but certainly to you, but to the public as well. I am sorry for these trollers that are coming on and posting this nonsense. I know YouTube, that's coming. Our feed goes out to Facebook and to YouTube. So the comments come from a variety of different places. I have blocked that person. We'll report them to YouTube, and we'll do the best we can to remove that if we can. I apologize for that. Unfortunately, there's no way in this day and age to avoid those completely. Sean, I appreciate the update. And the East Haven thing is interesting because of all the articles I've seen from the Register, from the current, I have not seen the list of the benefits that you laid out.
Yeah.
So it may be time, and maybe I could write an article, but at some point, those things listed out would be helpful for people to see and understand. I think most people are reasonable, and most people I talk to in East Haven are for it. Sometimes we just let the naysayers take the loudest people in the room. But Sean, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing, and hopefully we can get Tweed expanded pretty soon. I'll talk to you soon.
Good to be on, Steve. See you soon.
Thanks. All right. Okay, so we appreciate Sean coming on. I do. Meredith Gaffney just posted that needs to lead. I agree. The idea that we're going to let every town do something separate causes problems in every single town, and so that may not be the best way to approach. If the superintendent has some political cover, if they can say we were told X, if they're going to have this battle in every town, it'll just be crazy. The thing with CRT, I think it's amazing. I'm glad to hear him say that there's an acknowledgement that CRT isn't actually being taught. Critical race theory isn't actually being taught in the high school level. That said, then I don't know what the debate is. I mean, the question of whether or not race issues exist is not, I think that's been solved. We know that exists. We know we have laws that exist with race in mind, that we're meant to hold certain races, colors, what have you, down, and we have to, go back and change some of those laws. CRT is an advanced thought process that makes sense on a college level, but I don't remember never or wanting to avoid these types of conversations. Never mind just in high school, but also middle school. Seems normal to me. So Guilford will be an interesting case study, but when you have the Republicans come in, remember something. You have the Republican Party in Guilford. 120 people went and voted the other way. There were about 160, 170 votes total. 120 people voted the other way. It's very easy to say that Guilford Republicans are doing X or Guilford Democrats are doing Y. A small group of people felt a certain way, went into a caucus, and dominated that caucus. They did not put anyone at the top of the ticket, and which means they're very likely to have any success gaining any traction against Matt Hoey anyway, and very likely to get tickets down. So I expect a landslide on the Board of Education the other way, but 120 people do not define a party, and they should never define a party. And so that being said, it's an interesting conversation. We will cover that in far more detail. I do like this list of benefits to East Haven, though. $5 million in enhanced noise issues that'll be going out there. An area where 40% of the tax revenue of the tax bills can be reduced by developing that area. A couple other significant benefits. Pilot money. East Haven actually gets a lot. So a lot of this discussion about what are the benefits to East Haven, they're out there. And if people want the answer, it's there. I think expanding Tweed is a significant benefit to the entire area. And sometimes there are some people that may not like some of the impacts, but overall, I think it's an overwhelming positive. So Sean, I appreciate him coming on and answering some of those questions, as he always does, in a straightforward and honest manner. That being said, we'll do our best to be back on tomorrow night at 4 o'clock. Again, I apologize. This comment is staring at me, and I deleted it from the back end. I've sent in the alert to YouTube. I hope we can get it deleted because that was a good interview. I don't want to get rid of the video, but just disgusting assholes that sometimes troll our systems. That said, I hope you all have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.